Welcome, everyone. This is Danny and Karl with Get Wisdom, and today we're going to continue with the channeling series. Today, Karl's going to channel Lysander Spooner, who is a fellow who lived in Massachusetts back in the 1800s. I think he died in the 1880s, and he was quite a free thinker. He was an attorney, and he had some pretty interesting views at the time. And we'll talk more about him. You will have seen a little scrolling bio along with some music before this part of the video starts with Karl and I speaking. So that'll give you a little bit of a background, but we'll talk more about him. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you, Karl. And so let's talk about the free thinkers of the world.
Are there any left?
Well, that's a good question.
We're a dwindling group, and of course, you and I like to think of ourselves as free thinkers, and it's all dependent on what you really know and understand about yourself. You know, I think about this a lot because we're all being manipulated here on this little orb, and we don't ever know personally how much of our beliefs and our knowledge is true, actually happened, or was implanted somehow in our awareness and shaped our thinking, altered our beliefs to conform to that. And this is what we've been fighting all through history. So this guy is billed as a free thinker, and I'm sure in his day he was. And we'll see what it unfolds. But this is a very, very important idea. It might be the most important idea there is. Creators told us we can't really trust human beings anymore because no one really understands reality and the truth of things. We've all been so shaped by our culture and the manipulation within our deep mind, below conscious awareness, and the presence of lots of interloping dark spirits and so on that attach to us, manipulate our thoughts and our energy, and bully us. And that distorts things. We're walking wounded and don't know it. And we're being deceived by those around us because most people are manipulated to be complacent. So if you're not wanting to go along with the crowd and you feel there's something different that needs to be done, no one's going to listen to you. No one's going to pay attention. And most people just give up when that happens, right? I mean, you can't fight City Hall. And when everybody you know signs on and they say, oh, yeah, we got to be, loyal this or loyal that and vote this way or that way. It's hard to be a contrarian for most people. Some seem to have a talent for it. And maybe they're born that way. What's that?
But they're still ignored.
Yeah. But they will be a kind of outcast, persona non grata, maybe at their own dinner table at Thanksgiving or whatever, if they're too unruly and individual in their thinking. But those people are valuable because what I'm learning now is much of the time, if not most of the time, those so-called free thinkers, those ones who kind of go against the grain and question the conventional wisdom, are more aware, they're more awakened than the average person. And it's helped them to see truth through the fog and see the charade that's going on to make us complacent about things and not question, and to give us false interpretations of what makes the world go round. And if we embrace it, we're lost because then we're doing what our minders want us to do, those who control things. And that's how they have control. It's us. We're giving in and we're too vulnerable and don't resist when we can. So someone who's a free thinker who also speaks out and takes on the established order is quite daring and very much needed, especially in today's world. And of course, that's the world we care about right now because it's the one we're living in. History has already happened, but there's a big wide future. And I'd rather it go better than worse. It's already bad enough.
Yeah. I personally like to look back to some, people like Lysander Spooner, who's considered obscure. He wasn't that obscure in his time. He's not really that obscure now. I mean, if you talk to somebody who studied libertarianism or anarchy, he's usually going to come up because his thoughts, his thinking, his reasoning is foundational in a lot of this kind of material. So he did talk about, he was an early abolitionist. And I'll just read this short thing. This is from a book. If somebody's really interested in the guy who was considered a free thinker, this is a book. It's called the Lysander Spooner Reader. So without having to go out and buy all his books or whatever, pamphlets or writings, this one's a good one because it's a compilation of some of the stuff that really kind of set him out there as a foundational, reference for libertarianism and anarchy. A lot of people have tagging the government. That's not what it's about. That's a popular conception. But anyway, Spooner stood nearly alone among radical abolitionists. Abolitionist means people against slavery, in his defense of the right of the South to secede from the Union. So this is his writing after the war. And well, actually during the war too. Then, as if anticipating revisionist historians, that's pretty good. That shows a lot of foresight. He denies that the war had been fought over slavery. Rather, the war erupted, quote, for a purely pecuniary consideration, to wit, a northern control of the markets in the South. In other words, the privilege of the holding the slaveholders themselves in industrial and commercial subjection to the manufacturers and merchants of the North, who afterwards furnished the money for the war, unquote. Spooner's extensive treatment of this theme is surely one of the most fascinating pieces of writing from the Civil War era. So he would even disagree with other abolitionists about the Constitution and how that related to slavery. So he, at every turn, he kind of made himself known as someone who always took two steps back and said, hey guys, wait a minute, let's look at this. What does it really mean? What are we really trying to accomplish here? And throughout the theme that I found in all of his work was his dogged interest in the idea of freedom, of liberty, freedom, and the right to do what you want to do without doing harm to others. And so he took that to an extreme in many cases. He even started his own postal service to challenge the federal government because he thought the monopoly of a mail system was wrong. It was morally wrong. It was against the Constitution, or the spirit of the Constitution is the way he read it. So he actually started his own mail service in the East. And what the federal government did to shut him down was they cited him for every piece of mail that he sent through with using his private company. They cited him with an arrest warrant, if you will. So he had to defend all these different. So what they did, they outmaneuvered him by burying him in legal costs rather than fighting him on the issue itself. So his legacy is kind of built around this. I will challenge you. If you're not going to meet me out in the street, I will challenge you in some other way to make my point. He did the same thing with his own law degree. In the state of Massachusetts, there was a requirement, I think, for 5 years of study if you weren't in a university to become an attorney. Well, he studied for 2 or 3 years and then hung his board up, started doing legal practice. And then that one, they actually changed the law to comply with what he had done, because they couldn't really fight him on the merits of what he had done. So anyway, that's Lysander. He was quite a fellow.
Well, that's putting your money where your mouth is, for sure.
Yeah.
To live it and to be a kind of leader by example in taking on the established order. And that does get results because it forces people to stop and think about the right and wrong of what the proposition is. And that rarely happens in today's world, or maybe even in yesterday's world.
Yeah.
People just kind of go along. They're only dimly aware of things. Even with the news availability we have today, it's everywhere. But is it really news, or is it kind of willful manipulation? More and more, it's really proving to be the latter.
Yeah,
so where do you go?
Under the guise of news.
Yes,
it's not really news. It's entertaining, but they call it news, and then you watch it.
It's really the party line. It's interesting. I grew up in the Cold War era, and there was all sorts of talk and exposés about the Soviet Union and the Communist Party, and everything had to conform to the party line. So that really got driven into us as an object lesson, that government was really squashing individual freedom and liberty. But in America today, is it really any different? We get the party line through the media. It's not the Communist Party, but it's the political party of those in power, those in the establishment. And there's more and more talk now about the secret government, the deep state, that really has the power, and that the politicians are just figureheads. It's the bureaucracy, the so-called bureaucracy, that really runs things, because they can hobble a president by not cooperating or undermine them to such an extent they get booted out of office rather quickly because everything gets screwed up.
Yeah, I think Eisenhower is a good example of that. What happened to him?
Well, that may well be, yes. So the world isn't what we think, and the surface view will never give you the truth about things, because you're just be getting the message that the powers that be want you to be exposed to.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not. And that's what everyone will tout for the most part. And the other aspect of it, when there are conflicting views, you could challenge what I just said. Well, you've got news outlets that don't go along with what the other news outlets say. They say the opposite and so on. Well, that's an orchestration too. Because the powers that be don't want things to running along very smoothly and safely and with efficiency, and to forward the agenda and progress of the nation and the world. They want there to be discord. They want to have chaos. They want to have inefficiency.
And they also want to frame the argument. So
Yes.
they'll get you, so a lot of times what you'll see arguments, two sides being heavily discussing, but the question itself, the argument itself, is based on something that, even if it was resolved, wouldn't have any meaning anyway. But
yeah, it's usually a distraction of some kind.
Yeah. Or they've framed the question entirely in an unhelpful way, and in a way that where even if there was a resolution that came up to it, it's still kind of like in the meaningless column. It doesn't solve anything. Okay, you're right. Now what?
It's not an answer. It's just yes.
It's just a distraction. Yeah. Okay, so there's going to be one long question here where I'm actually going to read something he wrote. That's question 4. And we'll see how that works. I try to avoid these when I can, but this was just so good I couldn't resist. And Karl had the chance to look at it, and I guess we're okay with it. But it's a preamble, and then the questions at the end. So it's not like I've got a whole bunch of questions throughout the course of the questions. So that should make it a little bit easier when it comes to channeling. And so I think we should probably start and see what he has to say about freedom.
All right. Well, I'm all ears. I think it's something we need more of.
Yeah.
Because I'm told, and we hear this frequently from light beings, that we have the illusion of freedom. And I think that's, that would be my expectation, that he'll chime in about that.
Yeah.
And that's what the free thinker represents: someone who isn't being taken in, someone who isn't being controlled to minimize and limit them. And those people are our only hope, really, because we need people to help lead us out of this mess. And it's only clear thinking and true free thinking that can do it. We want divine wisdom in what we do, and that is very, very helpful, because I hear things all the time from Creator I wouldn't have thought of, and perspectives I wouldn't have ever guessed, because I'm a human and I'm stuck on that level, and I have to think like a human. How can I not? And it turns out that's not going to help us. We need something more than a human level perspective. So we got a divine being now we're going to talk to. So I'm looking forward to it. I will reach out to him through the Creator of all it is, as a being in the light now, so he can speak through me. And I do that through Creator to be certain of the accuracy and the ability to protect the communication from outside interference, primarily not having an imposter step forward instead. Most channelers don't take that precaution, or they might fool themselves in thinking that their channeling is safe and protected because they put white light around themselves or whatever, which doesn't really do anything but make them feel good, unfortunately. So more than 90% of channelers are being duped and not channeling who they think they are. So it's just a warning to all of you listening to this to be careful with channeled information. Think for yourself. We're offering this up as best we can with as rigorous a process as we can make it. And so just keep that in mind, that this is what we're facing, that the so-called higher realms are not a guarantee that in reaching out to them, you will connect or that you will get information from the higher realm when you do it. Most times you will not. You'll get some kind of lower level being who will step in and mind you and do hand holding and feed you warmed over spiritual truths, but only take you so far. And that's the problem with the current spiritual movement. It isn't really spiritual, and it'll suck you in. So I will connect, and then you will hear from him when he's on board.
Okay.
This is Lysander Spooner speaking.
Thank you for joining us. You lived a long life devoted to your ideas of freedom, where you were never married or became a father, but wrote and studied late into life. Did you accomplish your life's mission, and were you able to pass successfully?
I would give myself a passing grade, not because I accomplished all I set out to do. I would much rather have stood the world on its ear and changed everything for the better. That is the dream of the light worker and the ultimate goal. Realizing one individual alone cannot do it. Those with greater ability have left a larger mark. This is true of the great spiritual leaders. Those of us engaged in more human level work as scholars, philosophers, thinkers, and pundits have a lesser role, a lesser purview necessarily. It is the highest we can go, and in a sense represents being mired in the human quagmire of indolence and disconnection. This gives the starting point from a much lower perspective than would otherwise be the case. The ideal light worker would be someone with advanced intuitive connection and awareness of divinity and an ability to call on it with fidelity as your channeler can do, but from moment to moment, all during their day, and inform and support an outreach to humanity that gets attention and persuades masses of individuals to wake up and change. So I never reached that level of awareness by large numbers of individuals, but it is gratifying to me that my works are still honored and things still in print that I myself wrote. And that is quite an achievement in today's world, where things of value are suppressed and essentially squelched, most often before they can come to fruition. That is arranged. So I was not just tilting against windmills, I was tilting against monsters. There are monsters who have their grip on the world, and they're helped greatly by dark spirit beings, the fallen angelics, as they are termed. the demons of the Bible. These are real energetic consciousness-based beings that take a toll because they are a parasite, living through attaching to and dragging you down. This is one of the major risks in transitioning from the living, when you would normally make your way home again to the light. Yes, even the atheists among you will go back to the light when you die, if you are lucky. And luck is more about resistance to corruption than it is about random forces. There is nothing random about human life. It is you against them, you against the darkness. It might be you alone if you are different from your fellows. I was different in a way that made me quite resistant to manipulation. Because of it, my transition back to the light was uneventful. I was, in fact, in good enough shape that I could connect to the light callers and make my way back to the light. I was in that fortunate 2/3 or so of human beings for whom that happens without great fuss. Fully a third of people are still being stuck because they are not prepared. They may lack belief in the divine, have no expectations of what comes after other than fearing the nothingness. And indeed, that fate can become theirs because they have claimed it already prior to their passing. And they will not be able to sense the light callers extending a welcome to guide them home, but will still be trapped in the dark, a fate that should happen to no one, but happens still for many. You must be prepared for tomorrow. Thoughtful planning makes your life easier and more successful. Why should you not plan for the biggest day in your life? And that is the day of your passing from the physical to return home. You would not set off on any other journey without a plan to get home. It would be unthinkable. You always plan a path back. This is what round trip tickets are for. But in the case of physical death, it is not a round trip. In your seeing physical life as the be all and end all and totality of existence, you are in a round trip journey to the earth and back. But you are not given a ticket. That ticket is your awareness within. It is possible to keep going when you leave the physical body. If you do not know that, and if you are not a believer in anything beyond the self, you will be alone at the dock with no ship waiting for you, seemingly. It is a choice to be prepared for that eventual day. We guarantee you have one you know this as well, that no one stays among the living indefinitely. Use our example as a starting point if you wish. I did it through having a command of my sensibilities and thinking about what is truly important and having as a focus and a goal serving what I thought was the loftiest of notions. That is arguable, but it was good enough to keep me in a good enough shape to make my way back to the light. We hope you will be able to do the same. But it will be up to you largely to help that happen, because you have the free will to mess it up, to thwart it, to prevent it altogether. We are hoping you will straighten things out enough to have a smooth passage. We look forward to welcoming you here.
Okay, thank you. Your aggressive and unrelenting manner and fame for disparaging the tenets of government allegedly resulted in your law practice not being that successful because most people did not want to be represented by someone with such overtly public extremist views. Was this a fair trade now that you can look back on your life?
There is nothing about human life that is fair other than you have the choice to participate in it or not. Once you come down and are born, you are afloat in a sea of ignorance and disarray, deception and degradation. It might be all you can do to keep your soul unstained and to keep yourself safe enough from trauma. You will not die young because of it. There are the so-called advantaged as well as the disadvantaged. That might be strictly a materialist perspective. The advantaged are so because they have financial security and they have stability in their lives, most likely because they are a part of the power structure, if not the leadership and the government extension, but the economy in some way or another, serving productively to keep things going. So there is a reason for what happens, and people have productive work they can contribute and all gain from what emerges as useful products and services. The many have-nots are unable to take part, and they are at risk as well of not only lacking success, but more likely a shortened life. People need a reason to live. Being here in suffering is the opposite. Wanting to be somewhere makes all the difference. If you come in eager to help continue what you were working on in your last incarnation and find yourself like a duck out of water, that your family is more than you can handle, and the rough treatment you get worse than you thought it would be from looking at it in the light as you were planning what you would be doing, you may have quite a struggle on your hands to stay even and not drown in misery. There are few who are unscathed. That is a function most likely of divine oversight and protection, and often a plan beforehand to give you clear sailing for the duration of a life, as a bridge to coming back somewhat stronger and refreshed, and as a way to bide your time and skip over the karmic tendrils that would ensnare you and drag you back into difficulty greater than you could handle. That is divine grace in action. It is not a free pass forever, but respite, a kind of R&R, time out. And that life can help to strengthen you and give you some additional positive karma to build on, to counter the negativity, which inevitably will come back around to you once you return again. The difficulties of life go far beyond the surface. They go far beyond the genes. I was an iconoclastic figure because it was my true nature to be an individual. What made me so was the contrast between my clear thinking and the culture of distortion that is characteristic of human institutions and all of the teaching the young are exposed to. Anything that is a good idea will be questioned, and it will be challenged and attacked, at least at first blush, rather than embraced. That is not only a measure of the degree of difficulty and distortion people represent, but the presence of a hidden hand that will see to this, to make everything harder, to make everything controversial and confusing to the masses of people who may simply abandon an idea because it is more trouble than it is worth if their mind cannot truly sort things out with clarity so they can take a firm stand and side with the free thinker, demanding a fresh approach, a reconsideration of historical practice. There's nothing like the law as an example of hidebound thinking. It is an agglomeration of bad ideas piled on top of one another as a kind of an excuse for something happening that is non-divine, but must be allowed because it is convenient and is a popular notion of the times, and so ought to be allowable as legal. That is a highly subjective designation that is always built on top of human distorted thinking and corruption. Given the lofty edifice of the court system and the legislature cobbling together these questionable teachings that become the rule of law, are part of a kind of monstrosity that is an amalgam of the human divine perspectives when forced to be enslaved and controlled by puppet masters who are functional degenerates. They are truly beyond the pale. Psychiatrically speaking, they are psychopaths because they lack a conscience and as such are devoid of love and compassion. This is why the system of laws is not based on love and its distribution, but based on power and control, because the interlopers controlling the world value power and control above everything. And to them, love has no meaning or purpose. It is a human folly, puzzling to them. They see as weakness, and laughably so. So I see my not fitting in as a measure of how successfully I was able to avoid conventional thinking, to think outside the box, so to speak, and march to that different drummer. And in the doing, suffer the consequences of being disliked or disregarded. I understood at the time that people are quite different from one another. And I saw those who opposed me as simply lacking vision and lacking a kind of discipline to truly think things through, think more deeply, as that is what I always endeavored to bring about for myself in formulating my ideas and opinions. I did not realize as a functional matter where my ideas came from or how that process of devoting myself passionately to defining the deepest truth I could observe as having more than thought behind it. It was to a fair degree intuitive. I was tapping into divine wisdom much more than I ever realized. But it informed who I was, who I became, and my ability to resist conformity, because to me that was a compromise with truth. This is why the free thinker deserves praise and deserves recognition. We were heightened and thrilled in a way by the early discussion of how valuable the free thinker can be to a non-thinking world. We take no credit for this. We were simply being ourselves and wanting to be in alignment with truth, and naively expecting this could be determined and that I would be successful in this quest. But it is naive from a human level perspective and an appreciation of what humans are facing. with all of the prejudicial thinking that is inculcated by historical legacies, cultural beliefs, ancestral beliefs, and the genetics that predispose people to have many traits, inclinations, and inner awarenesses and instinctive attachment to certain ideas and approaches. I did not fully appreciate that there is a divine connection that all have. For some, it is only a vestige of what is possible for the average person. But even the loftiest among you has at best a weak signal, a weak and intermittent communication link to the divine. It is only because you have a divine heritage that you are prone to seek its precepts in your life and expect that will be true of others as well. It is that heritage that has spawned again and again the breath of freedom in the thinking of those who want to break off the chains of power and control, holding them down and holding them back. My life was an example of someone wanting to do that. And what happens to them in today's world? They will be sidelined and may well be muzzled and potentially killed outright for making the attempt. This is the established order, establishing the order they wish to see. They want nice, neat little rows, all thinking alike and acting alike, moving in lockstep in their subservience to the true powers that be. Your history is filled with spectacles illustrating this. Again and again, you will encounter newsreel footage of the mass army troops parading with their flags, with their uniforms, projecting that power as an image, acting like robots, trained to move as one, turn as one, stop on a dime as one, display a gesture of obedience and subservience in worship to their masters with a salute. This can be dressed up as a simple gesture of respect. And to some extent, that might be accurate. But if the person actually sending that army into battle is not even human, but an extraterrestrial in disguise, living among you, corrupting the thinking of your government and its leadership, and whipping you into shape as a military weapon in service to the darkness, they are not truly on your side. This is the danger of conformity and what it leads to. So I view my own journey as a positive one, but it is also an object lesson. And to the extent it lacked perfection and a larger influence, is a measure of my opposition. That opposition is still alive and well, and the same individuals who were present then are present today. They are longer lived than you. This is something to ponder, that those behind all the great wars of history are still running the world. You think the world has grown and gotten smarter, you would be wrong. The world has changed, but it is still being managed and controlled by other species of beings. The dark spirits, both angelic in origin and extraterrestrial, working in league to corrupt humans, and the physical extraterrestrials behind the scenes who have claimed your world as theirs and exploiting you for their personal gain and amusement. This is the true meaning of why the free thinker is so very valuable. The first step in escaping from a prison is to realize that is where you are living. It is the free thinker who sees that reality to some degree more than you and sounding an alarm. The question is whether you will listen.
Okay, thank you. You were an early and vocal abolitionist who did not agree with your more famous abolitionist peers insofar as you contended that the Constitution, when considering the meaning of the text, not the private intentions of its writers, was enforceable. You used a system of legal and natural law arguments to show that the clauses usually interpreted as supporting slavery did not in fact support it, and that several clauses of the Constitution prohibited the states from establishing slavery. Do you think this is a good and valid argument, given that later you viewed the Constitution posed as a contract that was unenforceable due to its unilateral nature?